Joining us now to discuss is Alora Mukherjee, director of the Immigrants' Rights Clinic at Columbia Law School, and Maya Wiley, civil rights attorney, former New York City mayoral candidate, and president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. It's great to have both of you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Alora, I'll start with you and this deadly ICE shooting. What questions does this investigation, we're in the early stages of finding out what transpired here, but what questions do you have when you see all of this?
When I see this, I want to know what actually happened. What happened in this particular incident, but also why are so many ICE officers on the streets? What type of training have they received to de-escalate situations? What kind of training do they have to use lethal violence? And what measures of accountability can we put into place to ensure that this does not happen again? This is not the first ICE death this year. This is the third person who has died in an ICE encounter since January 2025. And as the president is surging more law enforcement officers, more ICE officers to our streets, this is unfortunately perhaps a harbinger of what's to come.
Maya, do you see it that way too?
Oh, I think we were there with ICE even before this current administration. I mean, our journalists had to sue the Department of Homeland Security before the Trump administration to try to get an accounting of excessive force by ICE and Border Patrol agents because there were so many stories, so many either community members, family members, or advocates, including immigrants' rights advocates, asking questions about violence and deaths of people being tamed, including U.S. citizens, by the way. And when after a lawsuit to get information that they were refusing to make available to the public, what journalists found was between 2015 and 2021, there were 59 shootings by ICE agents and Border Patrol, and in at least 20 of them, it was clear that it appeared to have violated the policies that ICE itself had about discharging firearms, shooting, in exactly the kind of incident it appears that we're hearing about here. I say appears because we do need more facts, and each case is different, and there's a lot we don't know. But that said, the patterns are clear, and advocates for years have been raising really deep concerns about not having enough transparency, not having enough accountability, and having very few legal levers to ensure that ICE is held accountable or Border Patrol accountable when they are violating people's rights, including in killings. So we've already been there. Now that we're making ICE the largest federal Department of Homeland Security, but this federal form of law enforcement, the largest in our history, and we are unleashing them on police. I mean, on communities. It is critical that we have some accountability and transparency.
And speaking of legal levers, I mean, the Supreme Court appearing to basically just give a green light to the use of race and ethnicity. I mean, racial profiling is back, is how a lot of Americans are interpreting this.
Absolutely.
How do you, Alora?
Absolutely. So the executive branch turned to the Supreme Court when a federal district court found a mountain of evidence that ICE was engaged in racial profiling this summer in Los Angeles. And the lower court judge blocked that racial profiling. The executive branch went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court lifted the lower court decision and essentially gave the executive branch a rubber stamp to engage in racial profiling. And this is going to affect not just Latinos in LA, but racial minorities, ethnic minorities across the country. And the effect of this decision is to make the United States of America a show me your papers nation for the overwhelming majority of people who are not white. Anyone can now be stopped by federal law enforcement and be asked, do you belong here, and be required to prove whether or not they have lawful status. And this has affected even U.S. citizens who are plaintiffs in this very case, subject to violent detention, subjected to repeated questioning over the course of days about whether or not they belong in this country.
You know, we had the mayor of Shelby County on earlier talking about what it means to have the National Guard deployed in Memphis and around various parts of of the city of Memphis and the checkpoints that may have to be set up. And I'm thinking about what you were just describing with the Supreme Court decision and how it's going to create this two-tier system of society where I think most people who are white are going to feel comfortable driving in and around checkpoints, and people who are of different backgrounds and colors are going to immediately feel like second-class citizens who have to prove at a checkpoint that they are American citizens or that they are lawfully in this country.
Well, sadly, we hadn't gotten past racial profiling before this decision.
Right.
Let's just acknowledge
That's what
that.
I wanted to ask you, because I felt like after 9/11, there was, so much outcry over racial profiling, and then, cut to 20 years later, and we're really like maybe in a worse position than we were before.
Well, exactly. So we never fully dealt with it, although we had made progress, right? I mean, there was clear recognition by the courts, by the federal courts, that it was unconstitutional. It's race discrimination or national origin discrimination. It's wrong, and it endangers people. We were fighting around this on police accountability across this country. And remember, it was one of the things we were fighting as a civil rights community. Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which I have the privilege of leading, had been pushing for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which would have created more of a legal leverage, saying that racial profiling by federal law enforcement, that's what we're talking about, by federal law enforcement, is wrong, couldn't get sufficient bipartisan support for that legislation. We're still fighting for it. We're not going away on it. But now it is much worse because we have an administration that has, quote unquote, and this is a quote from the executive order that Donald Trump signed, unleashed policing. Now, taking and building ICE into and as we also know from California court decision, utilizing it wrongly and unconstitutionally for local policing as well as military. In this case, we're talking about people who are being deployed and also being given both tacitly and in many other ways the signal, and now from the Supreme Court, go ahead. Stereotype, profile, stop, and abuse. And that is the reality of what we're seeing happening to real people.
I wanted to read with you, I wanted to share with both of you the statement that we got this evening from President Trump on Truth Social about Memphis. He said the only reason crime is somewhat down in Memphis is because the FBI and others in the federal government at my direction have been working there for 5 months on the absolutely terrible crime numbers. Likewise in Chicago and Los Angeles, but the real work by us has barely begun. That happens after we make the official announcement that we are coming in all caps. And when we do that, as we did in now very safe Washington, D.C., the no crime miracle begins. Only I can save them, in all caps.
Such interesting phrasing.
Interesting phrasing, ominous. I mean, I think Governor Pritzker of Illinois has been warning that the deployment of the National Guard was a pretext to something much more sinister. When you start seeing this language, only I can save them, coupled with what President Trump said during the campaign, I am your retribution candidate, or other language about mass deportations, it really paints a very ominous and sinister picture of what may be coming. It's not about crime. It's not about reducing crime.
No, crime rates were down.
Right.
Dramatically down. In fact, Donald Trump as a candidate was lying about crime rates, stoking fear, and as an administration, he has gutted the very things that help people bring those crime rates down. Grants for violence prevention programs, for programs to have violence interrupters in communities that had gun violence, the kinds of investments in victim services, in supporting domestic violence survivors. All of these things that local cities and localities have been doing across the country, the same communities where, by the way, Donald Trump has deployed these troops and in D.C. has signaled his efforts to try to stop the reforms that residents voted for. So that's actually undermining the decision-making of voters, of people who showed up and asked their elected officials to do these things as states and cities have every right to do.
Laura, your thoughts on it?
And I would just add that those who are immigrants to the United States commit crimes at far lower rates than those who are born in the United States. And what we're seeing is authoritarian slip. Our nation is slipping toward authoritarianism with the myriad actions taken by the executive branch.
All right, Laura.